We're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. And again, appreciate folks being here today. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you again for joining today's webinar, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, also known as DEI, Language and Values in Outdoor Equity. My name is Joel Pinnell, and I'm the Vice President of Urban Forest Policy at American Forest, and also have the privilege of serving as co-lead of the America the Beautiful for All Urban Parks and Green Space Work Group, alongside Christopher Ramirez, former executive director and co-founder of Together for Brothers. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the lands each of us occupy today have deep histories that long predate the creation of our current cities, states, and nation. Indigenous peoples have stewarded these lands for generations and continue to do so today. While many of us participate in land acknowledgements as a regular practice, I think it's important that they serve as a starting point, not an end point, and encourage us to learn, build relationships, and consider our responsibilities to both one another and to the places we share. So again, thank you to everyone for being here and bringing your experiences and expertise and perspectives into today's conversation. Please use the chat to introduce yourself in any way that you would like, including your pronouns and where you're calling in from or where you're joining us from. So today's webinar is intended to be both reflective and practical. Our learning objectives today are to document resources, best practices, and policies that individuals and local communities can use, to share actions that individuals and local communities can take to address DEI language and values in outdoor equity, and to highlight stories and resources that protect cultural heritage in public spaces while ensuring communities see themselves reflected in those spaces, including access to information and representation related to ability, gender, race, ethnicity, sex, sexuality, and other identities. So our hope is that participants leave today with a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing the outdoor movement, practical examples from communities and organizations across the country, and concrete actions they or you can take in your own communities. And so before we get into today's discussion, I want to briefly introduce the broader coalition behind this webinar. So we're hosted today by the America the Beautiful for All Coalition, a national coalition working to ensure everyone has access to benefits of nature, parks, outdoor recreation, public lands, and healthy communities. And I'm going to invite Kitty Craig to provide a little bit more background on the coalition and its work. Kitty is with the Wilderness Society and serves on the coalition's backbone team. So Kitty, if you could also please drop the coalition website link into the chat and just give a little bit more about the broader coalition.
Great. Thank you, Joel. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm going to drop that in the chat. And if you don't know if this is your first time getting to know the coalition, again, this is the Mighty Urban Parks and Green Space Work Group of the coalition hosting this call today. And both Joel Pinnell here from American Forests and Christopher Ramirez from Together for Brothers lead that work group and have fearlessly over the last year and more. So thank you. But we are a coalition that was launched in around 2022. We are now 350 organizations strong and welcome more folks to join us. And we're really united across diverse missions, ecosystems, communities, and cultures. Our leaders represent perspectives from the front lines of the nature crisis, and we really work at that intersection of nature, justice, and health. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please explore our website. I'll drop in links later on how to join. If you're interested in really digging in at the work group level, we'd love to have you. Again, we all know, the collective action is so critical, especially at this time. We need to be as strong as we can, working across the movement toward this shared vision and shared goals. So that's it. Thank you, Joel, and thanks, everybody.
Yes, no, thank you, Kitty. And so just a little bit more about this particular work group, the Urban Park and Green Space Work Group. We focus on the places where more than 80% of people in this country live, where most of us experience nature in our daily lives. So it's neighborhood parks, urban and community forests, schoolyards, trails, community green spaces, other shared public spaces. So we are really working to bring together practitioners, advocates, policymakers, researchers, community leaders to share resources, elevate emerging issues, and advance policies and practices that support healthy, thriving, and connected communities. So You will see, obviously, today we're going to talk about DEI values and language. We regularly explore topics that include extreme heat, outdoor equity, school greening, public health, federal, state, and local policy, and much, much more. So if any of that resonates with you, we invite you to join our work group and stay engaged in future conversations. And I also want to acknowledge Christopher, who's been the driving force behind this work group for years, helping to build partnerships, facilitate conversations, elevate voices and experience of communities that are often underrepresented in the outdoors and conservation spaces. And so today is Christopher's last webinar as co-lead after many years of service. So I just want to take a moment to thank him for his leadership, partnership, and dedication. And so, yeah, on behalf of us, Christopher, behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for everything you've done to help shape and move this work forward. And I also want to remind you that today is the second installment of our four-part summer webinar series. Last month, we explored immigrant safety in outdoor spaces that is available now on YouTube. Next month in July, we'll focus on gray and green infrastructure, extreme heat, and school greening. And then in August, we'll wrap up talking about local and state policies for outdoor equity. So those are all going to be excellent webinars as well. And so invite you to register and participate in those. Okay, finally, the main event we're all here for today, again, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, language, and values in the outdoors. And over the last 5 years, the outdoor and equity environmental movement has experienced a period of significant change and reflection. So, following the events of 2020 with the pandemic and the broader racial reckoning that occurred in this country, a national conversation emerged about representation, belonging, access, and opportunity. That included who has historically had access to nature, whose stories are represented in our parks and public lands, and who has had a voice in shaping these spaces. We also saw unprecedented public and philanthropic investments focused on environmental justice, community engagement, and equitable access. At the same time, we now find ourselves in a very different political environment. The term DEI itself has become weaponized. Programs and entities have been challenged and targeted. Funding priorities have shifted. Businesses and organizations have reconsidered their language and strategies. And so we really want today's conversation to not be about reacting to the latest headline, manufactured political controversies or partisan talking points. The reality is that many of the issues we're discussing today, whether we're talking about diversity and inclusion, cultural heritage, environmental justice, public access, those issues have become the subject of significant public and political debate. And those debates have real consequences for all of us doing this work, for organizations, communities, and the people that they serve. Um, Part of the reason those debates matters is because language, in fact, does matter. And we know that, we've known that. So the words we use can shape culture, signal belonging, and influence how people experience our institutions and our public spaces. And so we'll hear today some examples of that throughout our discussion. But our focus really is broader than language alone. This is an opportunity to step back and reflect on what approaches have created lasting change, built trust, strengthened communities, and endured beyond any particular political moment. What have we learned in the last 5 to 6 years? What efforts have translated values into meaningful action? How do we remain responsive to current challenges while also building relationships, practices, and institutions that are thoughtful, strategic, and durable over the long term? And perhaps more importantly, how do we ensure that parks, public lands, and outdoor spaces remain, or in some cases become places where people from all backgrounds, particularly those most marginalized, can see themselves, feel welcome, and experience a sense of belonging? So those are just some of the questions that we're going to explore today. And to do that, I'm honored to have an exceptional and thoughtful group of speakers who we've intentionally brought together, representing different perspectives across the outdoor, parks and recreation, conservation, community landscape. And so we'll begin with Olivia Juarez of GreenLatinos, who will help ground us in community, cultural heritage, and the importance of ensuring people see themselves in outdoor spaces. We'll then go to Jerry James of the Sierra Club, who will discuss how parks and public lands tell stories about our nation's history, culture, and identity, why those narratives matter. Then Rosalind Johnson, the Director of Park and Rec for the City of Annapolis, Maryland, who will provide a local practitioner perspective on how values are translated into policies and programs. in everyday interactions, including her work conducting a vocabulary inventory that helps organizations identify and replace dehumanizing language. And then finally, Elizabeth Allen of Justice Outside will help us take a step back and reflect on what the movement has learned over the last several years and how we really work these durable approaches into enduring, changing, and political social environments. So I'll let each of them introduce themselves, but just wanted to frame that conversation. And so, we will have each of the speakers speak for 8 to 10 minutes with their opening remarks. We'll then have a moderated discussion of guided Q&A, and then we will open it up to everyone for a general audience question and answer session. So with all that, thank you again for joining us today. And Olivia, I will turn it over to you to begin our conversation.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you to the Urban Parks and Green Space Work Group, America the Beautiful for All Coalition, and my distinguished co-presenters. I'm so proud to be a part of this with you all. Hello, everybody. I'm zooming in from Salt Lake City, Utah. Olivia Juarez with GreenLatinos as a Public Land Program Director and a backbone team member of America the Beautiful for All Coalition. What I hope that you will take away from today's presentation are some resources and distilled best practices from a few messaging toolkits that I've been obsessed with using over the past few years that deliver powerful statements for freedom, justice, health, and equity. So what I hope you'll take away in all of that and what I aim to do with this time is to share a little bit about myself and GreenLatinos. I want to overview policies that influence communication in this moment, how it's led to some bad words, and resources for getting around some of those bad words to still talk about our values, our priorities, and the issues that matter to us, and come break through and get across to the people who we're trying to communicate with, and convinced to take action with us for our social, political, economic, and environmental liberation, as we say at GreenLatinos. And then I want to present a couple of ways for you to put these resources into action with the Our Parks, Our Monuments, Our Stories campaign, as well as the America the Beautiful for All Coalition Story Directory. So I have been at GreenLatinos for 4 years since the inception of America the Beautiful for All Coalition. Born and raised in the beautiful valley shaped by Great Salt Lake. And like I said, the messaging guides that I've obsessively used, I have been so effective for me, that came out in 2025, I've studied, and have led to more earned media placements than ever before. Before global military actions escalated and it became harder to break through in earned media and press hits. In a period of time before the conflict in Iran started, especially, the GreenLatinos Public Land Program earned 30 press hits in print news, radio news, blogs, and a podcast using these narratives in a 4-month period. In particular, the letter to the editor snapshot on the right, well, both of them lean on a combination of guidance focused on the experience of economic well-being that you'll learn more about and takeaways from the Freedom to Breathe Easier white paper that you'll have a breakdown about in this slideshow. GreenLatinos, to sum it up, is a national nonprofit committed to safe, thriving, honest, and accessible public lands, among other matters pertaining to climate change, environmental justice, and conservation through federal, state, local, and municipal policies and regulations. Everybody is welcome. All of you are welcome in La Comunidad GreenLatinos, and I invite you to join us. The main role that we play in the movement here at GreenLatinos is convening across issue areas and zip codes to remedy the environmental issues harming Hispanic and Latino communities and all of our neighbors through a shared love for nature and a shared appreciation for clean energy, clean transportation solutions, and beyond. So I'm going to breeze through these next few slides just to lay out the context about why we need to be here having this conversation about DEI language. This slide overviews state law and federal executive orders that set the stage for words to be banned. But before I move on, you'll see a bunch of hyperlinks in this slideshow. You'll have access to it so that you can refer back to the primary source materials and look at all of the details about what got us here. This is what happened as a result of implementing executive orders and state laws. Most recently, like today, ongoing litigation contesting action to remove materials at our national parks and monuments, referring to histories of enslavement, genocide, civil rights, women's rights, human rights, as interpreted at our national parks and monuments. And so, according to PEN America, we are now here in the United States of America with numerous words, topics, and phrases that have been banned at numerous federal agencies. Bolded on here are just a few that I think we all agree are widely used in everyday terminology across the nation, and that people get when we say what we mean by them. Solar panel, or solar power, women, climate, at risk, and so on. However, some of these words that we have been using, community diversity, BIPOC, DEI, environmental justice, even the word intersectional, are words and acronyms that, according to the Fierce Urgency of Now evidence-based toolkit, aren't effective or aren't effective in our communications. So the first thing I want to present to you from the Fierce Urgency of Now messages that advance diversity and equal opportunity toolkit are some solutions to these. What we know is that majorities across identity groups support diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. They recognize that it makes our workplace and our lives better. Opposition to these ideals as a whole is a fringe position. Yet, 40% of people don't know what DEI means. And most people, while they support the values behind diversity, equity, and inclusion, they estimate that there is less support for them among our country. And so what the Fierce Urgency of Now tells us is that when delivering messages, words work better than acronyms. So avoid the acronyms. And also use caution around the word equity because they say it requires more explanation. It's not as well understood, but it works well when framed around fair opportunity. Another remedy is to fully name race, gender, and other identities. Inclusive formulations that name groups and multiple groups, including majority and minority groups together, are really effective. Environmental justice and Latinx are a couple of those words that this other resources have made assertions don't really work for others. While 7 in 10, most adults in the United States believe in the goal of environmental justice, they had to be read a definition of environmental justice to know what it means and gives their opinion. And we have a long way to go towards driving shared understanding that communities of color indeed are more likely to be exposed to environmental harms, as well as racial and ethnic minorities. So what you'll find here is a poll about how US adults conceive of environmental justice when they're presented with a term. Pew and Axios have also done a couple of studies about how the word Latinx lands. And so suffice it to say, our solution at GreenLatinos in our effort to be inclusive towards or outside of the gender binary, we're finding Latine is working. But suffice it to, but beyond that, Latine, Hispanic, and Latino are words to use if you are talking about this identity group that seem to be performing a little bit better than the term Latinx. And I think that it's important, or I'll highlight that the word Latine is important to use for the gender inclusivity and just recognizing that people members of the community do support LGBTQIA plus expression. They support education around all of this, and they support freedom of gender identity. So it's not to say that the word is showing an opposition to gender diversity. Rather, it's really a matter of how it's landing. And that's a funny fact of Hispanic and Latino identity in the entire history of the United States. What we're calling ourselves and how we're defining ourselves is always evolving. So now I want to present to you four evidence-based toolkits that I'm going to again breeze through to show you just what's in there. Each slide contains takeaways that I found the most helpful to use, and within the slides are hyperlinks and more context to the complete resources. So first, as mentioned before, is the fierce urgency of now. It compiles dozens of research outputs to validate a clear framework for persuasive communication that they call the four-step messaging framework. This is one example that they use in the toolkit focused on using the framework for a message about education. They also have a guide for messages around the workplace, government, and consumer perspectives. The Future Over Fear, Tools to Build a Different Story toolkit by the Opportunity Agenda uses recent research into white supremacist narratives and civic engagement motivators combined with the Opportunity Agenda's narrative approach and input that they've gathered from the field. The future narratives that they've crafted include a racial justice narrative, a multiracial democracy narrative, and an immigrant opportunity narrative. Last two, what Americans told us about nature, justice, and health give you top-line findings from representative polls of US voters showing that people care about environmental issues, that environmental protection is bipartisan, and that we have credible, trusted messengers. This poll, in combination with a conservation language analysis and pre-existing race-class narrative assessments, showed high performance rates for three messages that actually get people to relate to nature, justice, and health. They're the land stewards message, the homeland message, and connection message. ASO's Freedom Over Fascism toolkit gives you lots of deets about why it's important to name the villain causing the harm when you're talking about harm being done. And finally, these takeaways from the Freedom to Breathe Easier white paper reiterate best practices on naming the villain and problem by using active constructions, identifying actors causing harm that are human or the result of human institutions rather than the environment in itself, caution against playing on the opposition's turf and giving them airtime, moving onto the opposition's turf to feed what we fight through negation, and guidelines for when you want to or need to make an economic argument. So to sum it up, I want to invite you in a couple ways to put these in practice. First is the Our Parks, Our Monuments, Our Stories campaign. You are invited to submit a 1-minute story on a voice memo or video, or 100 written words about your favorite national park memory or national monument memory and what you want this place in 250 years. You can submit a story. You are also invited to bring others in using the outreach toolkit with email and caption copy for others to submit their stories. Our goal is to get 20, combine them in a report to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, making the case for more outstanding public land championship, and create high-performing social media content that uplifts morale. If you're looking for a service to engage your audience on public land issues and create positive forward-looking narratives, would love to get in touch with you about doing a workshop together. And finally, the America the Beautiful for All story directory has a couple of engagement opportunities. This op-ed and letter to the editor's submission guide is compiling what you know about media outlets accepting these kinds of public opinions and sources of news so that we can help each other get better at placing these assets. And then we also challenge you to join us in growing the dialogue about our causes on the Nature, Justice, Health subreddit. In short, anytime you produce something or you see other news and other content about the issues that you care about, the challenge is to go find a relevant subreddit. For example, if I want to tell a story about Timpanogos Cave National Monument, I might put it in the Utah subreddit and then cross post that to Nature Justice Help. And that's where America the Beautiful for All Coalition is capturing engagement on Reddit, which is important to do because there is a good sized population of Reddit users that are completely not on Meta. They don't use Facebook and they don't use Instagram. So this is an important place to gain attention to your causes. And we're counting up engagements on that with the goal to have 12 million on our issues on Reddit by the end of the year. So that is all I've got for you. I'll drop the link where you can access all of this in the chat. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Olivia. So thank you. Tremendous wealth of resources and information, and those invitations to join ongoing storytelling and other campaigns. So thank you again. And so now I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Thank y'all. Just allow me to do my tech switchovers. Excellent. Share screen. Awesome. Oops. Started one slide too early. All right. Can y'all hear me well? Am I coming in, Joel? Good. Yep. So my name is Jerry James. I'm the Deputy Campaign Director for the Sierra Club's Outdoors for All campaign. And I've kind of Frankenstein some presentations together because I'm coming off of 4 days of presentations. So I'm going to talk about Truth Belongs in Our Parks and a little bit about the power of renaming. So across the country, there are thousands of place names, that are racist and derogatory. And this is like this map right here. It's from a data set that reflects these names. So the Sierra Club, along with several other partners like Native Organizers Alliance and the Wilderness Society and the American Association of Geographers, and a lot of organizations, we've come together to create a coalition for outdoor renaming. And so the goal is to make outdoor spaces more inclusive and welcoming for everyone by eliminating place names that are racist, derogatory, and honor folks of moral turpitude. So this is our coalition partners right here. We've been able to, some of the work that we've been doing is to advance the Reconciliation and Place Names Act. And so this act would actually create an advisory committee called the Reconciliation Place Names Advisory Committee, or Advisory Committee for Reconciliation and Place Names, and review these racist derogatory place names around the country and help facilitate the changing of these names. And so Secretary Deb Haaland actually implemented this by secretarial order in the last administration, and she was able to remove like over 600 place names that had the SQ slur. And then that advisory committee came up with a lot of recommendations that were amazing. But they were very slow to get this everything implemented. And so, when the new administration came in, one of the first things they did in the first opening months was disband this advisory committee. And so the Sierra Club and the Coalition for Outdoor Renaming, other partners have been pushing for this, the Reconciliation and Place Names Act, because this would codify this process. So the other thing that we've been working on as well at the club and with other partners like GreenLatinos is, pushing back against restoring truth and sanity to American history. So this is Executive Order 14253 and Interior Order 3431. And, the goal of this order is to remove content that the administration deems as derogatory to past and leaving Americans. So I'm assuming a lot of folks on this call know about this order. But if you don't, what's happened is there's not been really great guidance to staff on the ground on how to, what is the criteria. And so what's happened is, folks are flagging, content that mostly has to do with Black history, Indigenous history, climate science, LGBTQIA history, women's history, labor history. So it's been a very willy-nilly process. So part of the order was interior acts. They put up these QR code signs at all interior sites across the country, and folks were supposed to report content that they felt was disparaging. And so what we did along with other partners is used it, we basically used it against Interior. We said like, hey, we're going to take this and we're going to help people articulate how to stand up for inclusive history. And so we've, helped folks, probably tens of thousands of comments that were sent to the National Park Service and other interior agencies standing up for history. Actually met my slides out of order. We also worked last summer to send around a massive like sign-on letter. We had about 140 organizations sign on it to it, pushing back against this order. And it went to Secretary Burgum, the acting director of the National Park Service. And then simultaneously, we worked with our environmental law program to do a public records request to receive, all this content, like all the comments that people submitted, all the reports and exhibits and sites that were flagged. And then our communications team ultimately turned those public records request materials into over 40 media stories, podcast features, and a ton of background information or background interviews. So like, let me just tell y'all, like that's been like my last few months is like spending so much time on background reporters. Yeah, it's become like a second job, kind of. The administration owes me a check. And so we've tried to like leverage every single comment period that, Interior National Park Service puts out to, highlight the need to stand up for protecting our shared complex national history. And so these are just some of the comments that people submitted here. We at the Sierra Club and our coalition partners did not endorse this, these language, but this is just what people said. Awesome. And I just want to share with y'all, this is some of the, how the public records request comes in. And, what's important about this is, from a privilege standpoint, is the Sierra Club, is a legacy conservation organization. It's been around since the 1800s. And so to, do public records requests, it's a burden. It's a lot. And so that's why it's important for us to, leverage our privilege and get these materials and make them accessible to the community so they can like use them, organize around them, and understand like what's happening. Then the other big things that we've been doing is like working to build working and building coalition partners. And then, like I said, turning our public records requests and this like energy into, comms, communications materials, like stories in the New York Times, major state papers, a record, podcasts, op-eds. We've also been sending our chapters out to be watchdogs at various refuges, parks, and other historic sites around the country to monitor signs. And then I was actually able to be on the ground at Philadelphia at President's House site. So President's House site is a site that interprets the history of the 9 enslaved people, the 9 folks that were enslaved by George Washington at the founding of the country. And so the Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, who pushed for this site to be created, they've been fighting this. They pushed for the site to be created. They're currently fighting the fight to restore the panels. And we actually just received a setback about an hour ago or so. Is that the city who sued Interior to remove the panels, their stay was vacated, and so Interior would have been free to not or to remove the panels, but because there's a case in the Massachusetts court that has made Interior restore all content across the country. So for now it's holding. So for now Interior has to restore all these things, but the Philly case is not moving forward right now. The other things we've been doing is like, we did an August month of action last year, all across the country with our chapters and digital action hours. We did a major program at our Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center. These are just some of the photos, from Glacier to Manzanar. We were up with Representative Nagoose. And then I kind of want to like circle back before I talk about that slide. So I just threw this one in there. I want to talk about this because I'm like a very, big public health guy. And the big thing that folks should understand, about like why we're working on this is because, names and history matter, and they generate a sense of belonging, that you belong in this space. And so there's this, there's a lot of research out there that talks about the weathering hypothesis. So, the weathering hypothesis is basically, oops, sorry. The weathering hypothesis basically talks about it, how, racial and social economic disparities weather someone. It increases it impacts your mortality, impacts your mental and physical health. And so I'm just thinking about the toll of walking around in a landscape of having, racist, derogatory names, or living in an environment where your history is being removed. So I just wanted to kind of put there that there's actually health and scientific data that proves this. And then I'll close out moving forward is, we're not just trying to be on the defense, but we're trying to be on the offense. So kind of using a webinar to highlight another webinar. We're going to be having a webinar with Representative Sharice Davis, who introduced the Truth in National Parks Act, Save Our Signs, Avenging Ancestors, to kind of talk more about this work on July 2nd. And then the last thing I'll close with is we've been working on this with a bunch of partners for a program called We Want More History. So it's going to be September 26th. And the goal is to have a National Day of Public History programming across parks, libraries, trails, and other civic spaces to highlight, our shared complex national history and the need for understanding what history is and how it's made and how we can bring it to life. So that's me. That's my presentation. I appreciate America the Beautiful for All Coalition for giving me the platform. And back to you, Joel.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Jerry, for sharing that tremendous work, all the work that you've been doing. I think there's a long line of folks who think this administration owes a check to. So you have your place in that line. But again, thank you for all of that work and the weathering. I'm really interested in digging into that too. I think people don't realize cortisol levels and what stress does for our life expectancy and physical health as well. So this is all related and all connected. So now I'm going to turn it over to my good longtime friend, Rosalind Johnson.
Thank you so much, Joel. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, now I'm moving. I think everyone can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Joel, Jerry, and Olivia. I'm happy to be here today. Anytime I get an opportunity to help make people better, help you think differently, I do take it. One, I just want to point out that nobody's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes, and we just want to assume good intent and just continue the learning. If you are afraid, then that means you're doing something right, because this is scary work, particularly in this climate. And we're unsure and we're like, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my job? Am I making the right decision? But sometimes you just have to step out on faith, if that's what you believe in. And that is what I believe in. So I want to talk a little bit about language that we use. My screen's not advancing, is it? No, it's not advancing on your side. Okay, so let me see what I can do to try to fix that and change that. Sorry about these technical difficulties, but this is a good time for you to pull out your cell phone if you have a cell phone, because I'm going to be sharing a screen, and it's going to be easier for you to take some pictures of it, and you'll be able to utilize it later. So please pull out your cell phone so you can take a picture, particularly of the first two slides. So speaking of being scared, I'm just scared trying to get my PowerPoint to show right. So all right, I think we're there. You'll just have to deal with me on the next slides. Please let me know if you cannot see it and it's not advancing. So let's see. All right, so first of all, anyone who's working with outside, these are words that you need to know the definitions of. For purposes of time, I'm not going to go into them. You can easily Google these. Thank you so much, Olivia. You can easily Google these, but make sure you know these definitions. And this is for recreation and parks professionals, advocates, allies. You should know these words. This next slide is probably one of my favorite slides, because these are words that traditionally people have used, and we use them over time. And we think that these words are words that, I've always used these words. I've always said Indian giver. I've always said you can't serve two masters. I've always said these types of things These are words that you can no longer use because we are beyond these words. They are offensive to certain people, and our goal is to not offend anyone. One of the main ones that really gets my goat is citizens, where people say, "Oh, we serve all citizens," and then when I ask people, "When was the last time you checked citizenship?" They say, "Well, never. I never check citizenship." Right. You serve all residents and visitors. Can we just use that word? Because citizenship is a racially charged word. We serve people who have visas. We serve undocumented people. We serve everyone who comes to our parks. They belong to every person. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue for every single person to feel welcome. And that's our goal. We want people to feel welcome. So let's use residents and visitors. Please do not use citizenship unless you work for the citizenship, the people who check citizenship and passports, then you use that. I don't care where you're from. All right. And I use this with all of the directors. I talk around the country on this, and then it starts to get people thinking. And then when I ask, hey, does everyone have their plan when a transgender youth wants to play sports? Because we're not college, we're not giving out scholarships. We just want to plant the seed so that people can see what they're interested in and then go somewhere else to master it. So when I ask those questions, many of the directors are like, oh my gosh, do not have that plan. So talk about this. And then it's like, do you know what this means? 2S LGBTQIA+. So if you don't know what it means, then that means you have some work to do. Google is free, okay? So you can Google it, you can look it up. But because a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind the times. And I talk about, too, transgender youth. And I teach in Mobile, Alabama, which is the home of the Bible Belt. And when I say that, people are like, oh, you're going to start to let those people work in Mobile now? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Seriously? But then I use direct language. Do you want to be the reason someone commits suicide? And then people, I have their attention. They're like, whoa, because 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And it's because they did not feel welcome, because of the concerns that other people have about their sexual identity, all sorts of reasons. But it's because they don't have a safe place to be. So in Maryland, what we did was we created and had this picture on the left is our first 2S LGBTQIA plus summit. So we had a summit so that everyone could learn and everyone could be on the same page. And we're the first state organization for recreation and parks to ever do this. It was heavily attended. People learned so much. And guess what? I didn't lead it because I'm not a member of that community. So I'm not the expert to be able to talk about being a member of the community. So we had members of the community actually lead this program. And one of the things that I learned that was heartbreaking to me is that many people don't come and use our facilities or participate in our programs because they have nowhere to go to the restroom. That is mind blowing. Can you imagine having to hold whatever's going on for hours to be able to participate in a program because you don't want anyone to question what restroom you're going to use, which is just horrible to me. So then I was like, well, so wait a minute. People aren't coming to our pools because we don't have gender neutral restrooms. So then we changed our restrooms. This cost us the cost of a sign. That's how much it cost us. You use this restroom, whatever you want to call it, it's a restroom. Just use it, but just make sure you wash your hands. And that's where I have an issue if you don't wash your hands before you leave. And so the public acceptance of this, no one really kind of was concerned. No one really thought any kind of way. And people are surprised to learn that in Europe, everyone pees next to each other. You don't know if it's a man or a woman. And the stalls go from the ceiling to the floor. And when I've used the restroom, the only person that's looked at me has been a little kid who looks under the stall because they're in there with one of their parents or guardians. So, this whole thought that, oh, it's not safe and all those other things, it's just beyond me. So this year for Pride Month, we decided we were going to have drag bingo because we support safe places for everyone. And it was the best time ever. Of course, we had those people online trying to stir the pot saying, can you believe our tax dollars are going to this? And someone earlier was talking about a FOIA request. So beforehand, and I'm monitoring social media. I knew it was coming. And beforehand, we got a request for how much are you spending on drag bingo. I said, oh, okay, that's great. I said, before we spend it, let's make it as cost effective as we can. So we spent a total of $1,700. And after people are like, oh, $1,700, it was a non-issue. It was a nothing burger. So we were still able to support the community. We were still able to have a safe place, and everyone had an amazing time. So Annapolis, Maryland, if you've never been, it's the capital of the state of Maryland. We're surrounded by 17 miles of shoreline, and we're about 40,000 people, 40,000 residents. We are 7 square miles, and we have about 8 public housing areas, public or subsidized housing areas. There is one municipal pool, and it's an outdoor pool, and we have no public beach. So, because of this, and because African Americans are 7 times more likely to drown, and then Hispanic Americans are 5 times more likely to drown than their white counterparts, it's important for people to have access to water to learn how to swim. So, no beaches. So, our previous mayor decided that he was going to try to purchase this land. So, Carr's Beach, if no one's familiar with it, back during Jim Crow era, when blacks couldn't swim in the same water that whites swim in or in the same place, even though all the water's connected. I'm not even going to go there with the thought of that, but we could not swim at the same place. So this was a black beach where people could swim safely, where no one would harm them. And it was a segregated beach. It was on in the Green Book, which meant that it was a safe place for us to be. And my mother even was at Carr's Beach, my uncle, my aunts, everyone. But every single performer who was anyone performed at Carr's Beach. James Brown, Ella Fitzgerald, everyone. And it used to be 180 acres. So developers purchased it. Talk about environmental justice. I'll show you a picture in a second. But developers purchased it and turned it into very expensive homes, including condominiums. And then on the other side, developers purchased it and turned it into a very expensive senior living community. So there was a little sliver of about 6 acres that we were able to get of the 180 acres. And so we wanted to develop it. And because of the history, because it was a black beach, it was important to me that we had representation that matters. And I was very intentional. When we put out the RFP, I reached out to people who I knew were highly qualified, because a lot of times people think because you're using people of color, you're making an exception for qualifications. The person on the right is Mitchell Silver. He's one of the top 100 urbanists in the world. I did not say in the country, I said in the world. He was also the superintendent of New York City Parks. And this was the team that we assembled to do the master plan process. And this is unheard of. Anyone who works in planning or anything, for us to have such a diverse team had to be intentional. Our designers, because we're doing the shoreline and coastal renovation, are equally as diverse. And it's because we were intentional. We hired the best and the brightest, but we had an exceptional product. And so this was our kickoff meeting. The gentleman on the right is Vince Leggett, who subsequently, a few days after this meeting, he passed away. But he was the executive director of Blacks of the Chesapeake. And so it was his dream and his seed that he planted with our then mayor to actually purchase Carr's Beach. And so that's what we did. But at this kickoff, everyone around the table was so many Black and brown people to begin to plan with the community, which you see in the background, what Carr's Beach was going to look like. And I was very fortunate that through this process, the people on the left, the people on the right, the residents, they were very intentional too. And they said, we want to preserve the history. The woman in the middle is Sylvania, and she lives in one of those properties. She said, we want to preserve the history. We want everyone to remember, everyone to know that this was a Black beach. And so I was like, oh my gosh, our work is done here. There was another gentleman in the senior community. And a lot of times when you build parks, you have those NIMBY people, not my backyard. This is a park just for our community. But a gentleman named Howdy, he subsequently passed too. But he said, I don't want to see a fence around this park, because I want people who visit this park to feel that it's open and it's part of our community. I don't want it to be walled off. So we kept that in the forefront. Here's a picture about environmental justice. So this Black beach that's owned by Black companies, they purchased it, and you'll see that the county at the time put this sewer manhole right in the middle of the property. And it's sticking up. It's even higher now, but through erosion and everything else. So essentially you have this Black property, or this African-American property, and then you have a sewer pipe, and we all know that contains sugar honey iced tea that empties out into this land and water. So what message are we sending to people? But we work together, and this is not recreation and parks plan. This is not the master planner's plan. This is the community's plan. And this is what they came up with this great park. And so it's art throughout. It's kind of like a central park area for social gathering space to have events and activities. And then you'll see the beach. And so the beach is completely redone. Right now, the beach, if I go back to this picture, you'll see that the beach doesn't look very opening or enticing or open or enticing. But with this, it'll be essentially the length of a football field for people to swim. We'll have what you call whale tails or crab claws. So the currents and the waves and everything can't kind of pull people out, but it will maintain the integrity of the cove, for lack of a better term. And this is right on the Chesapeake Bay, so that the public will have water access to the Chesapeake Bay. And you'll see Baywoods is at the top and Chesapeake Harbor is at the bottom. Two very exclusive, high-priced communities, but they want the community to come into their space. And of course, we have critical area. We have to, think about all of those things. It's right along the bay. We really have to be careful. But I wanted us to remember where this land came from and what it used to be. So we also created, you'll see this get down area right here, and it was GET down, but because James Brown performed there, we call it the get down area. So youth will be able to come here. It's an outdoor kind of rocky amphitheater in the intertidal cove that they can learn about the Chesapeake Bay, estuaries, tides. It's also an accessible area for you to put a kayak in. So this is how you recognize and you honor past history, but you also make it available to other people. And so we are very excited about this. Tomorrow is Juneteenth, and I knew for these very open communities, it was going to be tough for us to even kind of have a major park event. So tomorrow we have our major park event, and they were excited and said yes. And I will be the first to tell you, I've been nervous the whole time. This will be our third year we've done it, but we have the Cars Beach reunion. So we honored history, the people who used to do the Cars Beach posters, the Globe, we had them do the posters. We have two stages. We have Motown on one stage and funk on the other with Legends of Soul and Ultimate Funk. And Clones of Funk. And the first year we had, I was like, oh my gosh, the community is going to have a fit. They're not going to like this. At first we didn't put a stage on this side. And I said, no, we have to put a stage on this side because people deserve to see the Chesapeake Bay in the background. So we did it. And the residents came down, and some of the people who were on the board, they said, I know you're not going to believe this, but they said they can't hear. Can you turn the music up? So I was like, say less. We are going to blow it up every single year. So tomorrow will be our third year. But working with the community, educating them, keeping them knowledgeable about any plans that we're doing, and including them has made this project very easy for us. And here's like a closer look of the get down area, the intertidal cove, and where people will be coming to the beach. And we'll be able to be all along the beach. But this is engagement, inclusivity, and practice, and working through and making the tough decisions, working with the community to get a product that everyone appreciates. And here's some resources that we use. NRPA, National Recreation and Parks Association, has diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces and an equity language guide, which has been very helpful. And what we've done in order to work in this political climate so that we could still receive federal funding is we've had a change in language, not a change in values. So if us saying, oh, we're focusing on groups that are within 5 miles of this location, instead of saying low income disconnected communities, that's fine. We can say it. We're still targeting the same group. We're just changing the way that we identify them. And of course, another resource is the world and then your friends. And hopefully your friends look different than you. Because if you have friends that look like you, you're not learning as much as you can. And that goes for whoever you are. So at the end of the day, we seriously have no idea what people are dealing with in their personal life, and we just want to be nice and make sure that they feel welcome in the spaces that we're in. It's really just that simple. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rosalind, for those lessons, reminders, and creating such a welcoming and inclusive space through Recreation and Parks in Annapolis. So for those of you who don't know, it's about 40 minutes, almost directly east of Washington, D.C. I have a boat trip and a call to Rosalind in my near future. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Allen. We are, I think, because of our technical difficulties, a little behind schedule, but Elizabeth, feel free, do your full, we can make that up on the back end in the guided question section. So I'll turn it over to you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and it's been wonderful to listen to the other speakers. As an educator myself, I always love learning from other people. I am Elizabeth Allen. I am the Director of Learning and Impact at Justice Outside. And really what we do is, specifically in my program, is that we offer DEI training, predominantly to white-led environmental organizations. We also offer individualized consulting and something called Learning Labs, which is like group consulting from a bunch of different organizations. And then I also am in charge of all the internal evaluation for all of the programs that we run, which includes things like our Rising Leaders Fellowship, which is a 9-month program for early professionals who are looking to rise up and become those greater leaders in our environmental movement. And in addition to evaluating the impact of our grant making program, which is a trust-based grant making program, we're able to give out several $1 million a year as an intermediary. And so we get a chance to look and see what these smaller nonprofits are doing in their own localized communities. And so what we're really going to talk about today is to get into what kind of work survives these political environments. Because as we've said, a lot of things have changed. And so how do you stick around? Because, we saw both at the beginning of the pandemic and even as things have changed the last couple of years, not everybody survives, even if they had a great mission to start with. And so over the past few years, organizations like Justice Outside have been asking a version of the same question, which is how do we continue to do this work in today's political environment? And honestly, from our perspective, we think that there might even be a more important question, which is what kind of work survives political environments altogether? Underneath all of what we've seen over the last 5 years, something quiet has been happening. I can say myself and Justice Outside as an org, we've had the privilege of working alongside community organizations, our fellows, outdoor leaders, and partners across the country. Whether someone comes to us through a grant, a leadership fellowship, a workshop, or our consulting, we've had the opportunity to watch and help people and organizations to continue this work over their time. And after watching what unfolds across so many different contexts, there were 3 things that we've come to believe through our observations. The first thing I've personally come to believe is that the people closest to their communities are also the people best equipped to lead through change. One of the patterns that we've seen across our work is that lasting change doesn't begin with the perfect strategy or the perfect message. So it doesn't matter if they're on Instagram or if they're going to their local library. It more begins with the people who have earned trust, who are understanding their communities, and who are willing to listen before they lead. We've seen it in our fellows who return home and bring people together around shared challenges. We've seen it in community organizations that adapt quickly because they're deeply connected to the people that they're working with and they're serving. And we've seen leaders who don't have all the answers, but know how to create space for communities to shape those answers together. Our communities don't need organizations to define the future for them. And if you've worked in this space long enough, we often know that that's part of the problem is that nonprofits go in and think they have the answer instead of spending the time to listen to the community to find out what they actually need. And so what they really need are organizations that are willing to invest in the people who are already building it. The second thing I've come to believe in is that relationships create resilience. People often think of leadership development as building skills. And yeah, we've seen that happen. But just as often, we see people leave with something even more valuable. And that's a network of peers that they can call when they're facing a difficult decision, a new challenge, or simply need someone who understands the work. In the last 3 years of collecting evaluations and seeing how we are impacting young professionals in our Rising Leaders Fellowship, the greatest takeaway, although it's not the easiest to fund, but we don't care, is they just want connection. And literally myself and the director of programs will be like, these babies just want connection. And that's all they're looking for. And so we're trying to think about like, how do we not only get them connected, but then how do we keep them connected over time? And then finally, I've come to believe that resilience isn't just something organizations discover during difficult moments. It's something they've built long before these moments arrive. So over the past several years, we've watched organizations navigate the changing political landscapes that everyone else has also spoken about, shifting funding priorities, evolving language, and this increasing uncertainty. And the ones that have adapted most successfully aren't necessarily the ones with big budgets or really with polished messaging, but they are the ones that have already invested in strong leadership, trusted relationships, thoughtful planning, and a deep understanding of who they're working with. So in other words, they didn't decide who they wanted to be when the circumstances changed. They already knew who they were. The challenge wasn't finding the values. It was adapting how they express and live those values in changing environments. So when we're talking about things like the language, it wasn't a matter of, oh, we need to come up with new language. It was how do we say what we're talking about, not confuse people, and still be able to do things like apply for grants and not worry about funding or getting reported in some way, shape, or form. And so one of the things that I've come to think that the difference between being reactive and being adaptive. Reactive organizations usually ask, how do we respond to the moment? But an adaptive organization is going to ask, given who we are and what we value, how do we move forward now? And that distinction really matters because we cannot predict every political shift. We've all been talking about, okay, the midterms are coming up. Hopefully things will change after the midterms. Although we can't predict what is going to happen. We have hopes for the midterms, but we can't predict what's definitely going to happen. And some of that is also state dependent. Some of it dependent on your local communities. We've seen how in some states things are gerrymandered so badly now that maybe some of the local shifts that they were hoping for may not come to fruition anytime soon. And so we also want to make sure that we're keeping in mind that we also can't predict any sort of funding changes, because what an organization or a foundation finds to be sexy and they want to fund now doesn't mean that they want to fund it 3 years later. All of a sudden it's like, well, now we care about literacy. And 3 years from now, they might decide that they don't care about literacy as much anymore. But it's not like we don't still have people who can't read, just like we don't still have people who need help and assistance or even want the assistance related to DEI related projects. And we also can't predict what the public conversation is going to be like. But what we can do is invest in the things that help organizations adapt with integrity by developing those leaders, strengthening those relationships, and creating opportunities for reflection and learning, and building the capacity to evolve without losing sight of their missions. And that's the main reason why we as an organization don't just invest in programs. We really invest in people, organizations, and the networks that we all create. Because when the moments of uncertainty come, and they have, and they will continue to do so, we want to make sure that the communities, the organizations that we serve have more than one response. Our role isn't to tell anyone how to navigate change. It's to help create the conditions where their leaders, our organizations, and the communities that we have need to navigate for themselves. And so I'll leave you with the question I started with, which is, what kind of work survives political environments altogether? After watching hundreds of leaders dozens upon dozens of organizations and numerous communities over the past 3 years that I've been with Justice Outside, I don't think the answer is found in a particular word, a framework, or a political moment. I think it's found in the work that is rooted deeply enough to adapt without losing itself, work that trusts community leaders, work that invests in relationships before they're needed, work that develops leaders and organizations with the capacity to learn, evolve, and stay grounded in their values. Because our political environments will always change. Funding priorities will always shift. Political narratives will continue to evolve. And the next challenge isn't a matter of if, it's when. But if we spend our time building up those strong leaders, those resilient organizations, continue to build those authentic partnerships, and invest in the communities that we have empowered to lead, then we aren't just simply preparing for the next moment. We're building something that can outlast us. And I think, honestly, that's some of the most important lessons that I've learned during this time. Thank you.
Awesome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And so you are sort of the framing we wanted to talk about. How are we being adaptive, not reactive, and all the things that Justice Outside and the work that you're leading are already doing is just exactly, I think, the lessons we should be taking from this. So, virtual round of applause for all of our panelists. I learned so much in the last hour. And again, we will be sharing. This is recorded, and we will, in some form or fashion, trying to be share the slides for all of the tools and resources that have been provided. So those of you in the audience, if you have questions, please put those in the chat. We may even be able to come off of mute. I will start with a guided question, open to any of our four speakers. And then if we have audience questions, love to work that in as well. But a question I have is, what did the outdoor movement, using that term very broadly, what did the outdoor movement learn from the increased attention to equity and belonging following 2020 and some of the pendulum swings we've had with that? So any lessons learned that we can take from that and move forward? So that's an open-ended question to anyone, any of the four speakers who wants to address that or has any thoughts on that.
I'd be happy to answer that. So one of the things, COVID, as horrible and awful as COVID was, it did help the outdoor movement because the only thing that was open were grocery stores, hospitals, gas stations, and parks. And so people could afford to go to a park because they were free. They felt better when they went to the park. And it takes 21 days to create a habit. And we know COVID lasted longer than 21 days. So it helped us build advocates for parks and recreation. I was in Baltimore County at the time, and a good year for us in Baltimore County would be a $4 million capital budget. But because people voted with their feet and people were going to parks, and Google had COVID-19 Google mobility data, and that showed that we had a 289% increase in park usership. So Google was kind enough to provide that to us for free. It's still online, the data's still there, but that gave us the data we needed to tell elected officials who were making financial decisions that this is what people want to see. And so that really helped us. Our budget went from $4 million to $120 million for capital investment in 1 year. We were able to build the first 0.8 acre playground, which was a $1.2 million playground. We were able to get the Ravens to give us $500,000 towards that. We were able to purchase 13 real estate transactions in 3 years, and we increased our park inventory by 200 acres with those 13 real estate transactions. But that was a direct relationship to the surge in people wanting to get outdoors.
I'm still trying to process that 4 million to 120 million in 1 year, Rosalind. That's
So
incredible.
because we had CARES Act money and we had the ARPA money. And so I will share this. So recreation and parks, traditionally we're like watching things happen instead of making things happen, and we're reacting to them. And so when that money became available, I talked to my team. I said, look, this is our chance. What do we want? And we're not used to thinking big as recreation and parks people because we usually don't have big things to work with. We usually have to take the scraps that are left, and we're always competing with police, fire, and education. So my team came up with, oh, we want 1,000 backpacks. I was like, you're kidding me. I was like, we don't have any vehicles. We're, dropping off PPE. We're the second largest provider out of school meals. We started asking for every single thing. So we got a lot of money for with the CARES Act, with the ARPA funding. It was the same time that the state had borrowed our program open space funding, and we weren't going to get it back. And I was like, no, 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 no. Now's the only time, the best time for us to ask for it back. So we're made whole. So money was kind of coming from everywhere, and we were ready, and we just carpe diem. We seized the moment.
That's amazing. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So I love that story. Any of the other, Elizabeth, Olivia, Jerry, any of you want to tackle that question?
I think one of the things that I noticed was it highlighted how many people had been left out when we thought about the outdoors and the outdoor movement, whether it was people of color, whether it was people in bigger bodies, the LGBT community, but the fact that there were so many groups that it never thought the outdoors were for them. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, wait, maybe it is, and started to enjoy it. We had an interesting dynamic in where I live here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which ironically has the largest public park system in the United States. And but the mayor took all the basketball hoops off. And but the kids didn't bat an eye. And I saw more kids climbing trees than I have since the 70s. And that was fun to see. And folks busted out their roller skates and had their speakers out, and they were roller skating, and so they were finding other ways to adapt and spend time outdoors. And it wasn't a positive. They were able to flip it to a positive, and it cost him politically because he conveniently then didn't put the baskets back on until 3 days before the election. And they were like, mm-mm.
And And so I do want to piggyback off of that because Elizabeth, you reminded me of something because we did take the basketball hoops down, but I said if we're taking the basketball hoops down, take those tennis nets down too. So we did both because basketball to me targets one community and tennis targets a very different community. And so we took them all down. And that set well with me. And that's what happens when you have diverse people around the table. I will say too, during COVID, we started protesting because we had the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And so the place where people could protest were in parks. And it was safe to be out in parks. Joel, you'll appreciate this. We sent our picture of Black Lives Matter protest in one of our parks, and it was on the cover of National Recreation and Parks Association magazine, which was huge for those of you who don't know. So I think it gave an opportunity to, yes, people were left out, but it also gave the opportunity to bring people to the table and allow their voice to be heard.
To match that, we the public golf courses all stayed open.
I have some thoughts. It goes a different direction. I think that there was a big explosion of attention on this issue. And it was like finally like, but we've been here. We've been doing this. And I think what it solidified for me is like we need federal funding for, outdoor equity focused programming that exists outside the corporate space because so many brands and stuff pump millions of dollars into, the space, which is great. But the pendulum swung, so we have 2025 come and we see, tons of EJ money get, clawed back. We see, in the IRA, IIJA, like, my city, there was $20 million that was clawed back for an urban tree canopy road diet type project in like a predominantly low income part of our town. Now, I think they're trying to get the grant back because they retooled the language. But what I'm saying is we need like durable, to Joel's point earlier, we need durable revenue sources that exist outside a corporate space to fund this work. And I've just been reflecting on that. Like all these brands have like swung away from it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Jerry. And Rosalind, that cover of NRPA is a BFD, as some people would say. So I certainly do appreciate that. And Elizabeth, you reminded me, it's necessity is the mother of invention. And I always tell my youngest daughter, boredom is the mother of creativity. You're bored, then do something. Use your imagination. So do we have any questions from the audience? I know we're here in the last 10 minutes here. Trying to go through the chat and see if there's any questions. So if someone wants to lift one of those up, I do want to leave time to invite all of our speakers to give closing remarks. And before we wrap up and conclude, and again, somewhat just a wealth of information, perspective, resources, frameworks. You guys have done an amazing job.
Joel, I see a couple questions. One was a specific one related to the Google data that I think you might have mentioned, Rosalind. The question is, what data was collected from Google? I don't know. I do remember that. Is that source still available? Any links you can
It
share?
is. I'll drop the link in. I just have to find it. And I'm afraid if I close my screen, I won't be able to find it, but I'll try.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. And then another question from Skylar. Any recommendations for offering programming at or helping community to access local outdoor space when public transportation is not available or does not reach the space? And again, these outdoor spaces that are intended to serve local children and families who don't already have access to outdoor spaces. So it gets at the transit gap question.
So a couple of things. So it could be grassroots. So transportation in local jurisdictions is usually a federal program. And so what we do have people do sometimes is go down to our council meetings, local government, and advocate to put in a bus stop. Depending on the jurisdiction, a bus stop could be what, $40,000, depending on whether or not they already have kind of transportation within the jurisdiction. And so that's an opportunity, or talking to the Department of Transportation director and trying to get a federal grant. That is an opportunity. And now Uber and Lyft will also provide transportation to and from if there's no kind of inherent transportation piece. So trying to see if you could apply for one of their grants, where if people are going to a park, you can get a $10,000 grant. So the first $10,000 worth of Uber and Lyft rides will take people to parks. But those are just kind of three quick ideas off the top of my head. But don't take no for an answer.
Thank you for that. And Kitty, thank you for monitoring the chat better than I am doing. Given the time, I do want to give each of our speakers about a minute or so to give some final thoughts, reflections, anything you want some of the participants to take moving forward. So we'll start with you, Olivia.
Coming from an advocacy-oriented organization, in addition to convening and having heard so much love and desire for revitalizing our urban green spaces and being able to connect with each other in them, I do want to, as last words, uplift the Revitalizing America Schoolyard Act. A lot of really great energy. In my mind, it's one of the most strong proposals out there in the Senate that puts money, appropriations to very strong, clear goals of turning our schoolyards across the nation, particularly at schools with high free and reduced lunch enrollment and other environmental disparities in their communities, to revitalize their schoolyard, to put in native vegetation, to put in tree canopy, to grow food, to create outdoor learning spaces. And so definitely encourage you to check out the Revitalizing America Schoolyard Act. GreenLatinos is a place where we'd love to connect you with others in your community on organizing to get support for that bill, or at least on the non-lobbying and promoting education and awareness about the lasting impact that this bill will have on our children and everybody else who's a part of their lives.
Thank you for those thoughts and that call to action, Olivia. And I think Senator Heinrich from New Mexico, I believe, is a Senate sponsor, and I believe Summer Lee sponsors the House bill as well. And I'm sure we'll talk about that on next month's webinar on green schoolyards. So, Jerry, I would invite you to give closing thoughts and any calls to action if you have them.
Gosh, I think, there's talk about transit to nature, so right now, we need the Transit the Trails Act reintroduced in Congress. I know that we've been working, it just hasn't been reintroduced, but this would create federal funding to give funding to like municipalities, transit agencies, to create transit solutions, multimodal transit solutions to nature. So I just wanted to say, like, we really need that. I'm really excited, like, to be a part of, Lexington Parks and Recreation just create this thing called the Nature Bus, and I was a part of that because I was part of the master planning team for Lexington's first Riverside Park. And I wrote a bunch of case studies within the master plan that talked about micromobility solutions and other transit to trail systems across the country. And the city of Lexington took that and they decided to pilot it. And it's really cool because they're using just like a 10-passenger shuttle van. And then they're not just, taking people and, hey, hop in the van, drop you off at the park. They're also pairing it with programming, which is really, really cool. And then taking folks back to where they need to go. So I just wanted to highlight that Transit the Trails, Nature Bus, pilots. I know, like, city departments have limited money, but like, y'all, if you're out there in the city, these city parks departments, et cetera, do a little pilot, see if it works, and then we find that private and public dollars. So that's what I got.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Just going reverse order or not reverse order, same order as our presentations. Rosalind, any closing thoughts you have?
I remember the first African American county executive in Prince George's County. He said, "You can do anything if you quit acting like, a little something." So you can do anything, and I just want people to keep that in mind. And you'd be surprised how much you can do by just asking people. We wanted to do a Hispanic Heritage Festival, and so we decided, oh, we'll do Lucha Libre. We spent a lot of money on this, and no one came. And we found out someone else, there were like 1,200 Hispanics at the Hispanic Resource Fair. And so we said, well, we're not going to work harder. We're going to work smarter. So we said, hey, would you like to partner with us and you can use our 80,000 square foot facility next year and have your event here? They were like, oh my gosh, we have been hoping and praying for a space to be. And we're like, we'll partner, just put our logo on your information. We were concerned about this past year. We did not want to advertise it because we didn't want ICE showing up. And we said, just use your underground channels. And we had over 800 people show up in this climate for it. And it cost us far less than that Lucha Libre. And it really touched the people that we were trying to touch. So there are people who partner with you. I saw someone asking about Juneteenth. Find an organization, invite them in. You would be surprised how far it goes and how much they will help you get to your goal. And don't let funding stop you. I saw Albuquerque say, oh, I wish we did 10% of what you did in Albuquerque. We didn't start like this. This has been 3 years of work. When I first got here, my team didn't know how to program. We all worked on it together. They're excellent. So you just have to start somewhere. Where they say a little pebble will create a whole ripple. So just start somewhere. And when you're scared, you're doing the right thing.
I love that. As a federal lobbyist, closed mouths don't get fed. So ask for more than what you want, and you might get what you want. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, last word is yours.
All right. I think the biggest thing I'm thinking about is, when we're thinking about people being purposeful, one of it is to slow down to speed up. So when these things hit, it is very easy for us to react, and that panic sets in, which is human nature. And to take that moment and say, all right, let's slow it down, let's think about it, and then start putting the things in place. Because honestly, not only are you probably going to end up with results faster because you slowed down, but you're also going to have a lot less mistakes or things that you're going to have to clean up on the back end. So I guess my final words would be like, when things start changing on us, slow down to speed up, and then just remember that we are all playing a long game. And the small community-led organizations and their work is going to be the greatest change that we're going to see over the next probably 10 years.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Thank you again to the panel. We're right at time, so I'm going to be brief and just conclude us here. But really, this conversation was everything that we were hoping for and more. The panelists just brought not only the perspectives, but again, tangible resources, frameworks, and tools that I hope everyone can deploy directly in their communities, and really just a path forward. And I think it's been a lot of gut punches over the last year and a half for those of us doing this work. And I'm glad that we're in a position where we're standing up, we're punching back, we're fighting for what's right for our communities. And again, just having those resources in place, having the language to use to be able to do that, and not just be in our emotions and be in our feelings, but actually make the change that we want to see in our communities at the state level, at the federal level, at the national level, and across the world. So thank you again to everyone for being here. Thank you again to our panelists. Enjoy an extended weekend, watch some World Cup, get outside, do whatever it is that brings you joy. And I'm also reminded, just be nice. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice. So Roz, thank you for that. So thank you, everybody. And we will all convene again soon.